I once coded for 27 hours straight because Daniel told me we had one shot at landing a demo with a defense contractor's procurement team. I was in sweats, hair matted, 3 empty Red Bulls and 2 cold hash browns deep into the night when I finally got the simulation module to pass QA. I clicked deploy, looked up at the kitchen clock. It was 4:11 a.m. and thought, this is what belief looks like. Not love, not infatuation. Belief in the product, in the man, in the vision we said we shared. Daniel called it our company. He introduced me as his co-founder at pitch nights, always with that toot charming grin and a casual arm draped around my shoulders like I was both his secret weapon and lucky charm. I was never the face of anything. We both knew the VCs wanted his tall, clean-cut bravado over my bleary-eyed hoodies and dry sarcasm, but I didn't care. I was the architecture, the bloodstream, the one who made his PowerPoint dreams function in a backend that didn't leak memory like a sieve. 5 years of commits, crashes, late-night Git patches. 5 years of database migrations that ran while we celebrated fake Christmases in March because we were always too slammed during December. 5 years of ramen-fueled weekends and sleeping under my desk with a weighted blanket because the HVAC timer shut off at 10 p.m. and Daniel forgot to fix it. And every year when I'd ask, hey, when does my equity paperwork finalize? He'd give me that same golden shrug after the sprint, or after this funding round closes, or lawyers, they're slow. I swallowed it. I was tired, sure, but fulfilled. I had something real, something ours. And if you're already yelling at me through your headphones, save it. I get it. Hindsight's 20/20, and betrayal always seems obvious from the outside. But in the moment, when you're coding something you believe could matter in the world, and the only other person who believed in it is sharing cold Thai food with you at 2 a.m., you don't think scam, you think team. By the way, if you've made it this far, first of all, respect. Second of all, take 2 seconds and hit the subscribe button. 90% of people don't, and it seriously helps the team out. Even if you're just here for the vengeance, especially if you're here for the vengeance, clicking like helps stories like this reach more people who have ever been ghosted by a startup bro with a Yeti mug and mommy seed funding. Anyway, the first red flag was subtle. It wasn't a fight, it was just a missing file. I was trying to check the latest cap table spreadsheet for a potential investor intro Daniel mentioned. Simple due diligence. But the shared folder, our shared internal docs drive, had a new subfolder I didn't recognize, executive restricted, and the cap table gone from my access. I pinged him about it in Slack. He replied with a smiley emoji and, yeah, just organizing some stuff for Series B. Nothing to stress on. You've got enough on your plate with backend refactoring? I stared at the screen. That was the first time he'd referred to me like a contractor, a specialist, not a partner. Still, I told myself he was just trying to handle VC optics. He had a way of spinning things to sound reasonable, even when they weren't. I remember whispering out loud to no one, he's just stressed. It's a folder, not a funeral. Besides, we're in the middle of rewriting the entire customer licensing module. Again, he said it was mission critical, and when Daniel called something mission critical, I dropped everything. Friends' birthdays, even my sister's engagement party. We'll celebrate when we IPO, he used to say. I believed him, but my gut kept tapping on the glass. A week later, I walked past his office and heard him on a Zoom call I wasn't invited to. I caught the tail end of a sentence that made my blood go cold. Yeah, we'll get her rolled off gracefully. Optics matter, rolled off, like I was a rogue plugin or a bad patch, something you uninstall politely without causing bugs. I stood there, heart beating in my ears, pretending I'd dropped my AirPods, crouching just outside view of the webcam. I wanted to march in, demand clarity. But instead, I just stood up and walked back to my desk, opened a new terminal window, typed one line of code I hadn't used in years, nano oath filing compliance txt buried in the comments, there it was. A single clause, a formality at the time. Signed, notarized, filed with the Secretary of State. Named Compliance Officer, Christine Adele Warner. He forgot. I never did. The text came in at 7:04 a.m. I remember because my phone buzzed just as I was brushing my teeth, halfway through humming Fleetwood Mac's Dreams. The message preview glowed on the screen. Thanks for existing, but don't come in. I thought it was a joke. Daniel loved his little Zen monk one-liners, always trying to sound like the founder of some minimalist cult. But when I opened it fully, the rest didn't scroll. That was the whole thing. No emoji, no punctuation, no signature, just a digital obituary for 5 years of my life. I tried my work email. Access denied. Slack logged out. I swiped my keycard in the office door downstairs that morning just to confirm the nightmare was real. It blinked red. I stood there like an idiot while the security guard, who I once bought a birthday cake for, looked at me with the same pity you reserve for stray dogs that used to have collars. By noon, my calendar was wiped. My name was gone from the website's About Us section, replaced by Leo F., lead backend engineer. Leo, the junior who once asked me what a race condition was and then argued with me about it. I wanted to laugh or scream or something, but all I could do was sit in my car staring at that stupid message again, watching the word existing warp in the sunlight. I called Daniel once. Straight to voicemail. My second call, he picked up. His voice was smooth, almost rehearsed. Christine, I figured this would be easier over text. Easier for who? He sighed like I was inconveniencing him by existing past the sentence. It's just the investors want clean titles. Too many cooks. You were always more of a contractor anyway. Contractor. The word landed like a rusted nail. I bit my lip till I tasted iron. I wrote the system. And I appreciate that, he said, like he was talking to a customer service rep, but this is a different phase now. You'll land on your feet. He hung up before I could reply. I sat there for a long time. No tears. No anger yet, just that hollow, numb quiet you get when your body's waiting for your brain to catch up with the car crash. 5 years of all-nighters, missed weddings, caffeine shakes, and adrenaline rushes, gone with one sentence that sounded like it belonged in a Hallmark breakup card. I didn't smash my laptop. I didn't tweet a thread. I didn't storm the office like a Netflix protagonist in slow motion. I went home, fed my cat, opened my backup drives, and started sorting through old project folders like I was cleaning out someone else's house after they died. Every commit log, every build, every scrap of code that bore my signature, I archived it. I didn't even know why yet. Maybe it was grief disguised as organization. But somewhere under the surface, a colder thought had started to form. If he thinks deleting me from Slack deletes me from the company, he's in for a surprise. 2 days later, I saw a photo on LinkedIn. The team at lunch, smiling, holding champagne flutes. Caption, celebrating new beginnings. Daniel in the middle, Leo next to him, wearing the hoodie I left on my chair. My hoodie. The rage didn't explode, it seeped, slow and silent. I didn't scream, didn't post, didn't even tell my friends, I just went still. A kind of silence that feels heavier than sound. I boxed up the few company t-shirts and the half-broken mug that said world's okayest coder and left them by the dumpster. No note, no goodbye email. I saw Daniel once more that week. He was coming out of the investor's office when I pulled into the parking lot to drop off my keycard. He froze when he saw me, tried to smile, but it faltered. Hey, no hard feelings, right? I walked up, placed the keycard in his hand, and said nothing. He looked nervous now. Christine, you okay? I met his eyes. You should update your filings. He frowned, confused. What filings? I just smiled, small and sharp, like the edge of a USB drive, then turned and walked away. No drama, no tears, just silence. That silence hit him harder than any yelling ever could. Because somewhere deep down, Daniel knew I was the kind of woman who didn't vanish, she archived. I disappeared for exactly 31 days. No LinkedIn activity. No GitHub commits under my name. I didn't touch a terminal, didn't check Hacker News, didn't even update my resume. I bought a $40 used kayak off Craigslist and paddled around Lake George until the muscles in my arms burned more than the betrayal in my chest. At night, I'd sit in the cabin I'd rented upstate and scroll through old commits on my backup drive, not to mourn, but to remind myself what I'd built, what he hadn't. For every line of Daniel's charm, I had 10,000 lines of functional code humming like an underground engine. Grief didn't come as crying fits or wine-drenched rants. It came as quiet, a numb, precise kind of inventory. I tallied every ignored Slack message, every we'll get to that later about equity, every time he made my roadmap sound like his during pitches. It all clicked now. Day 32, I filed paperwork for a new LLC, Copperfinch Solutions, a dumb name pulled from a camping sign I'd passed, but it worked. I used an alias, C. Warner. I bought a domain, registered a burner email, spun up a private Git server. By week 2, I had 3 small freelance gigs from a recruiter I knew who owed me a favor. They thought I was a ghost dev out of Detroit. I let them believe it. Quiet money, clean invoices, all of it untouched by Daniel's world. That's when I opened the folder. It was in a box I'd nearly tossed during the move to the new apartment, back when I still thought Daniel and I were building something permanent. It was labeled in Sharpie, Tax/Compliance 2018. Inside was a coffee-stained manila folder with a sticker from a notary's office in Palo Alto. I remembered the meeting clear as glass. Year 2. We'd landed a tiny contract with a federal-adjacent defense analytics group, a nothing burger of a deal at the time. But Daniel had been giddy. Government contracts make us legit, he'd said. Investors love anything with acronyms. The client required a named compliance officer on file with binding authority for data handling and ethics reporting. Daniel didn't want the hassle. Put your name, you're better with paperwork anyway, he'd said, shoving the form across the coffee shop table. I trust you. I read the fine print. Page 7. Clause 4.2c. Authorization may not be transferred or removed without written and notarized consent from the named officer. I made him sign a backup copy. Then I filed one with the Secretary of State myself. That was the folder in my hand now. Oath filing not removable without original consent. I stared at it for a long time. The corner still had a faint oil stain from where Daniel had eaten egg rolls on top of it during our celebration dinner. He never read it, never really read any of it. I whispered, "You should have read the fine print, Danny," and something in me clicked. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet, it was about restoration. My name wasn't a ghost in that company's story. It was woven into the infrastructure. They just didn't know which cables were live. I spent the next few days searching public filings. I used my LLC's name, ran quiet queries through SEC records, checked their registered agents. No changes, no updates. My authorization still lived in their compliance docs, untouched, unchallenged. Daniel hadn't removed me because he couldn't. He didn't even remember, but the buyers would. Big money does diligence, especially when government contracts are involved. One clause, one binding oversight clause signed by a woman he tried to erase, was enough to light a fuse under every shiny deck he was selling. Didn't call a lawyer yet. I didn't make a move. I just bought a wall calendar, marked June 4th in red ink. Under it, I wrote 2 words, trigger letter. Then I got back to work. It started with a DM from Yuki, the last good soul left at the company. We weren't close anymore. Distance had grown the way it does after an execution-style exit, but she still owed me for mentoring her through a total back-end meltdown that could have tanked her first six-figure job. The message was short, don't quote me, but Daniel's been polishing pitch decks like it's Shark Week. Whisper is big buyout coming, like big. I stared at the message and didn't blink. My brain began filing the possibilities into neat, emotionless folders. Step 1, check filings. California Secretary of State database. Delaware Public Registry. Federal contractor portals. It was all there, buried but traceable. Then I saw it. Freshly updated licensing archive, linked to a pending transfer of corporate assets, under a shell buyer listed as Altara Northbridge Partners. The kind of generic sounding, beige acquisition firm name that made you smell wood-grain boardrooms and PowerPoints designed in Helvetica. Buried 2 folders deep was a PDF dated 3 years ago. File name, Gov Contract DA 47 Oath Paperwork PDF. I opened it. There, crisp and unedited, was my name, my signature, next to the clause that had become my private gospel. Compliance Officer Authorization, non-transferable. Named Officer, Christina Del Warner. Not removable without signed and notarized release. They hadn't updated a thing. Daniel had been so busy grooming his baby for $300M exit, he'd forgotten the brittle little hinge holding the legal door in place was signed by a woman he'd ghosted like an ex after prom. I felt nothing. No glee, no rage. Just that same click I'd felt in the cabin on day 32. The sound of a gear slipping into place. I printed it, highlighted the clause, slid it into a new manila folder, labeled it in Sharpie, trigger letter draft. Then I bought a burner laptop, not for hacking or theatrics, but because I wanted a fresh, sterile place to write what would become my scalpel. The letter wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even emotional, just a plain, notarized notification to all relevant parties that the named compliance officer had not authorized any transfer of responsibility or rights. No signature from me? No deal. I marked my calendar, projected closing week, June 4. Yuki texted again a week later. He's been doing these big inspirational speeches. Says we're entering our legacy chapter. There's champagne in the fridge. NDAs going around. Legacy? Of course. I didn't respond. I didn't warn her. This wasn't sabotage. I wasn't burning his house down. I was just reclaiming the deed he'd filed under my name and assumed nobody would ever look at again. Let him keep prepping investor slide decks. Let him strut around like some startup peacock, bragging about a product he barely understood beyond what fit on an elevator pitch. Meanwhile, I kept my receipts, tracked every announcement, watched the paper trail like a hawk with insomnia. He'd built a rocket. I'd designed the launch codes. And on June 4th, I'd decide whether to let it take off or not. Somewhere in a brushed steel office 3 states away, a junior counsel named Marissa F. had the kind of Tuesday that changes careers. Buried under 200 pages of compliance documentation, she caught a line most would skim past. Transfer of liability and intellectual property is contingent upon signed release from named officer. See clause 4.2c, she flagged it. She highlighted it. Then she did what junior lawyers do when they don't want to get yelled at. She escalated quietly. What followed was a ripple. Not a tidal wave, not yet. Just a hush that moved through the buyer's legal floor like the sound of a broken printer in a library. Someone on that team finally asked, "Wait, who is this named officer?" They checked the records. Christina Del Warner. They searched internal email threads, no messages, no correspondence, no forwarded introductions. Odd. Daniel, meanwhile, was on a podcast bragging about navigating the complexities of compliance in early-stage growth. I watched the clip on mute while stirring lentils in my kitchen. His hand gestures were all wrong. You can tell when someone's trying to look confident and just ends up looking like they're karate-chopping ghosts. 2 days later, I received a letter. Printed, heavy stock, logo embossed. The return address, Altara Northbridge Partners Legal Division inside. Miss Warner, we are conducting final due diligence in connection with a proposed acquisition of Synergenic Systems, Inc. Records indicate you are listed as the named compliance officer on licensing documentation related to federal adjacent contracts. Please confirm your current position and whether you have issued any formal releases regarding this authorization. Sincerely, Angela Rosenthal-esque. No panic, no threats, just polite legal curiosity. The kind that comes before very expensive meetings. I smiled, folded the letter back neatly. Then I went to my safe, pulled out the binder. The original notarized document from 2018 still had the notary's smudge of pink lipstick on the edge. I remembered her. Gloria. She'd complimented my nail polish and asked if the guy I was starting a company with was just business or something else. I'd laughed and said, still figuring that out. Gloria had no idea she was certifying the slowest, cleanest detonation of a man's ego ever filed with the state of California. I wrote my response that night. Plain, legal, precise. To whom it may concern, I confirm I remain the named compliance officer as registered with the state of California in relation to licensing agreement DA 47. No release has been signed or authorized. Documentation enclosed. Sincerely, Christine Adele Warner. I enclosed the notarized copy. Sent it via certified mail and courier. One to the legal firm. One to the buyer's head office. One to the company itself, Daniel's company. Then I sat back and waited. The reckoning wasn't a shout, it was a pause, a delay. A chain reaction of emails with subject lines like urgent, compliance inquiry, immediate attention. I checked the Secretary of State database. Quietly updated my contact address from the old startup P.O. box to my current LLC address. A breadcrumb trail, subtle but unmistakable. I wasn't hiding, I was watching. Let Daniel keep setting up investor calls and prepping Instagrammable photo ops of champagne glasses clinking in modern conference rooms. Let him smile for LinkedIn headshots and practice signing his name like he's already the next Elon Musk of government analytics. Because while he was busy trying to look like a visionary, I just reminded the room that I held the pen. Daniel stood in front of a backlit Synergenics next chapter banner like he was giving the closing sermon at a startup church. There was no pulpit, just a rented all-hands space with exposed brick, a camera on a gimbal, and two unpaid interns handing out branded tote bags stuffed with stress balls and oatmeal bars. He was clean-shaven, wearing his second-best blazer, the one he used when pitching second-tier VCs who liked founders with hustle. I knew that blazer like I knew every broken promise he ever made. The live stream wasn't password protected, sloppy, but expected. I found it through a friend's reposted Instagram story and watched it from my living room, cat curled against my hip, cursor hovering over the pause button like a loaded gun. Daniel's voice was syrupy, performative. We've worked tirelessly to build something extraordinary. And now, with this historic opportunity ahead of us, we're stepping into a future none of us could have imagined back in that tiny WeWork space with the leaky espresso machine and no AC. Cue nostalgic laughter from the audience. I zoomed in on his face. He smiled, but his eyes were already darting scan mode. He was nervous, trying not to be, reading something off the teleprompter but behind it searching, probably for the whisper, the missing piece. I leaned closer, took a screenshot, sent it to a folder labeled June 4 Live Capture. Then I opened a new tab, drafted an email, subject, attendance confirmation to whom it may concern. I will be in New York for the scheduled signing. You may want to ensure I am on the attendee list. Christina Del Warner, no fluff, no backstory. One sentence that would feel like a ghost tapping the window. I hit send, tracked the read receipt, no reply. 10 minutes later, the live stream glitched. Cut to a wide shot. Then back, Daniel was gone. The chat filled with confused messages. Where'd he go? Audio's out. He was mid-sentence? A junior comms manager in a tan blazer tried to fill the space with some nonsense about tech gremlins. I smiled and closed the tab. Daniel had just realized who still had keys to the vault. The rest of the week passed in quiet motions. I packed a carry-on with two outfits, one for the signing, one for after. I booked a hotel 4 blocks from the firm handling the merger. Not the fanciest, just clean and quiet with strong Wi-Fi and a 24-hour front desk. I updated my legal folder, made copies, one on a USB drive, one on my encrypted cloud. I even ironed the blouse I hadn't worn since our second funding pitch, back when I still thought Daniel and I would be on stage together when the confetti fell. Back when I thought equity was just a delayed handshake, not a vanishing act. The day before the flight, Yuki texted, "Talk around the office is weird. Daniel's locked in with legal. People say there's a clause hiccup. He's pale." I didn't reply, just like the message. That night, I walked through Central Park with a coffee and watched the city thrum around me like it didn't know it was about to witness something microscopic and massive at the same time. The kind of moment that doesn't make headlines, but ends empires. The kind of moment that starts with one woman walking into a boardroom with paperwork in memory and leaving with the terms rewritten. The boardroom was colder than it looked. Glass walls, chrome accents, a half-dozen men in suits you couldn't buy off the rack, plus one woman in a plum blazer who radiated the kind of corporate serenity that comes from having shredded 3 startups before breakfast. I watched them through the tinted panel just long enough to see Daniel laughing with the buyer's CFO, holding a flute of something probably too dry to enjoy. His back was to the door. His hair was too perfect. His collar was stiff. I waited for the cue. Inside, the buyer's lawyer, a tall man with silver at his temples and a voice like a sealed envelope, was walking them through the final formalities. Clause 12, acknowledging the agreed-upon valuation, he said smoothly. Flipping a page. Clause 13, confirming the accuracy of executive titles and compliance filings, then a pause. He reached into the folder beside him, pulled out a single sheet, held it up. Before we proceed to signatures, he said, this deal is contingent on the named officer's authorization, specifically the original compliance officer of record on federal contract DA 47. He turned the page, held it up, my photo, from the original filing. Me in a cheap blazer, hair pinned back, mouth slightly open like I just told someone I hated flash photography. This individual, he said, tapping the image. Christina Del Warner. The sound in the room shifted. Laughter vanished. Breaths caught in throats. Everyone turned to Daniel. His smile evaporated before the first syllable. Yeah, that's she's. He reached for his phone, fumbled it. It slipped out of his hand, hit the table with a dull smack, and clattered to the floor like a dropped weapon. Where is she? The buyer's lawyer asked calmly. Daniel blinked, sweated. No one moved, and then I stepped through the door. Quietly. Wearing the same shade of lipstick I wore the day he told me you were always more of a contractor anyway. My heels clicked once against the tile. The plum blazer CFO turned, arched a brow, then smiled, not out of politeness. The kind of smile you give when the missing variable walks in and balances your entire spreadsheet. I walked to the open seat left at the end of the table. My nameplate was missing, of course. They hadn't expected me. No one said a word. Daniel stood halfway, then sat back down. Pale, hands clenched. Christine, he muttered. I didn't think. I laid the folder on the table, unsnapped the flap. Daniel flinched like it was a loaded gun. I didn't look at him. I looked straight at the buyer's counsel. Shall we proceed? I said. The room shifted again. This time not in panic, but in recalibration, like a compass finally catching true north. The silence wasn't awkward, it was respectful. And Daniel, he didn't blink, didn't breathe, because he finally understood. I wasn't just back, I'd never left. I didn't sit down right away. I stood at the edge of the glass conference table, fingers resting lightly on the manila folder. Gaze steady on the buyer's counsel, not on Daniel, not on the nervous assistant in the corner who looked like she might bolt for the door. I had rehearsed this moment in silence so long it no longer felt dramatic, just inevitable. This is my amendment package, I said. My voice didn't shake. Conditions for officer signature. I slid the folder across the polished surface. It stopped in front of the lawyer with a satisfying thud. He opened it, quietly, methodically. Inside, 7% equity, retroactive to initial vesting schedule, backdated to founding year 1. Immediate removal of all non-disparagement clauses relating to Christina Del Warner. Official recognition of Christina Del Warner as co-founder in all public and private registries tied to Synergenic Systems, Inc. 3 pages, 4 signatures, all clean, all lawful, all enforceable. I watched the buyer's team take it in. The general counsel leaned in. Brows tight, the CFO scanned the backdated equity line and didn't blink. Daniel, on the other hand, couldn't keep still. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again like a modem struggling to connect. This is ridiculous, he blurted. She hasn't been part of the company in over a year. The buyer's lawyer didn't look at him. Instead, he asked me, calm as a surgeon, is this negotiable? I smiled, not smug. Just final. No, I said. It's already filed with the regulator. That was true. 24 hours earlier, I had walked the signed document into the Secretary of State's office in Manhattan. Not e-filed, not emailed, walked, notarized, stamped, time-sealed. The buyer's lawyer leaned back slowly in his chair, then turned to Daniel. We'd rather delay the deal, he said flatly, than risk a compliance scandal on a federal-adjacent contract. Your call. You could almost hear the oxygen leaving Daniel's lungs. He looked around the table for support, but there wasn't any. Not from the buyer's team, not even from his own. One exec actually slid his chair an inch back like he didn't want any residual fallout. Daniel's eyes met mine. I said nothing. I didn't need to. This wasn't a power grab. It was a correction. I wasn't asking to be included. I was reminding them I already was. Every system they built, every client pitch they rehearsed, every dollar they raised, ran through code with my fingerprints on it. They just didn't know the fingerprint was also a legal binding clause signed in triplicate. Let Daniel stammer. Let him sweat. Because here's the truth they all saw now. You can cut someone out of the Slack channel. You can delete them from the website. You can even rewrite the pitch deck. But if they sign the foundation, you will answer to them. Daniel's face had gone gray beneath the conference room lights. The sweat darkening the collar of his expensive dress shirt was no longer subtle. He looked like a man slowly realizing the house he'd been bragging about didn't have a foundation. He opened his mouth, tried to object again, but nothing came out. Not even spin, not even charm. The silence that followed wasn't awkward anymore. It was damning. The buyer's lead counsel was already initialing my amendment. One executive flipped to the equity clause and underlined it with a pen that probably cost more than my first month's rent. Another exec, lean, sharp, no tie, leaned forward and said without irony, "She is the system." The room shifted again. Not a gasp, not shock, just quiet acceptance of a new gravity. Daniel had no leverage left, no bluff to call, no workaround. He glanced at me, maybe hoping for mercy, maybe praying for compromise. But I wasn't a vengeance movie caricature. I didn't gloat, didn't smirk. I just watched him the way a firewall watches incoming traffic. And in the end, he signed. The pen trembled in his fingers. He didn't read the line, just signed. They slid the packet to me. I signed too. Same name, same signature from that coffee-stained compliance clause 5 years ago. And with that, the merger proceeded. On my terms. No confetti, no applause. Just the sound of controlled breathing and the faint hum of a refrigerated boardroom. The buyer's team stood, shook my hand, thanked me for clarifying things. Daniel didn't move. I packed my folder, snapped it shut, walked toward the door. As I reached it, I paused, looked back just once. Daniel sat at the table, still staring down at the dotted line he thought he owned, until I signed it into permanence. The image of him frozen there, mouth slack, tie crooked, relevance slipping, etched itself into my mind like the final line of clean code. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual noise. Horns, footsteps, wind between high rises. But inside me, stillness, not rage, not triumph, just closure. Real, surgical, irrevocable closure. They tried to delete me. I just made myself unskippable. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.